They didn't laugh with you. They laughed at you. At your thin resume, your overlooked birthdays, the years that seemed to pass without reward. They said you'd missed your chance, that if you weren't first, you'd never arrive. And for a while you believed them. You wore their doubt like heavy armor. But listen, this isn't a story of pity. It's a warning, because here's what they failed to see. The deeper the roots, the taller the tree. The ones who sprint to the spotlight chase noise. The ones who wait, who endure, cultivate wisdom. That's the difference. They mocked your late start, but they never understood what delay really means. Delay isn't weakness, it's refinement. When illusions fade, you're the one who still stands. You don't build for applause, you build for endurance. You don't beg for entry, you break the code others overlooked. And once you break it, the arena is yours. So unlock your phone, scroll past the wins that once stirred your envy. What's trending now will be forgotten tomorrow. Polished, fast, hollow, fragile. That's not victory. That's a countdown clock. Nietzsche tried to shake them awake. The will to power decides destiny. Repeat a conviction until it defines you. They repeated defeat. But you're about to project authority. Pay attention. Here's the hidden advantage of a late start. 3 powerful levers. Discernment. You choose better paths. Precision. You waste less energy. Autonomy. You stop asking for permission. That's why the overlooked become dangerous. They disappear into the background, then resurface stronger. They don't need applause. They don't need announcements. They create results. If this speaks to you, you're not behind. You're preparing. Flip the timeline you once feared. Watch the hourglass in reverse. Time isn't your enemy. It's your weapon when you master it. In the moments ahead, I'll show you how delay can become deliberate triumph. How to transform the years they mocked into an edge they can't match. The sharpened filter that removes wasted pursuits. The fire that makes you unbreakable. The inner conviction that replaces hesitation with command. The cleansing of relationships that once drained you, so no one else defines your path. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your pace, but you do owe yourself a decision. Keep scrolling, keep counting strangers' wins, or ignite the foundation you've been building in silence. They laughed at your late arrival? Perfect. Because when you're finished, they won't laugh, they'll ask for the blueprint. This isn't a comeback, it's a revelation. A late start isn't late, it's chosen, and your moment begins now. A deception so widespread, so quietly embedded, that most never notice when they swallow it. It doesn't shout, it whispers. And the whisper says, you should have figured it out by now. You're too late to reinvent yourself. That window already closed. You hear it in offhand remarks. You see it in the smirk when you admit you're still finding your way. In the quiet laugh that trails. She's still chasing that? Rarely spoken outright, yet carved into news feeds, auditions, investor rejections. The message is the same. If you're not successful by 30, you're behind. If you're still striving past 40, the world doesn't see resilience, it sees delusion. But pause. Who decided life's peak must arrive in our 20s? Who decreed our sharpest ideas, our deepest insights, our most lasting contributions must appear before our minds have even matured? Not nature. That decree came from marketing. Hollywood glorifies youth because it sells tickets. Tech glorifies youth because it sells the myth of the teenage prodigy. Institutions glorify youth because it keeps people locked in the cycle of predictable milestones. It's not truth, it's commerce, and we bought it. Because in youth, noise looks like brilliance, speed looks like victory, and if you're not racing ahead, you're falling behind. So we rush, not to create something authentic, but to match someone else's timeline. That rush was never achievement. It was fear. Fear of being left out. Fear of going unseen while others collected applause. Scroll any feed. LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, it's there. Younger, faster, richer, louder. Every update, a subtle jab. You're late, you're behind. But here's the fire that burns the lie down. You never failed. You were conditioned. That's the word. Nietzsche called it eternal recurrence, the cycle where repeated patterns carve themselves into your reality. They become the script you live by. That voice inside saying, "You're too late," that isn't instinct. It isn't practicality, it's residue. A leftover imprint from a culture that equates youth with value. But what does youth actually give us? Energy? Sure. Confidence? Sometimes, but also naivety, fragile identity, dependence on others for validation. Society doesn't glorify youth because it's wise. It glorifies youth because it's loud. It mistakes volume for depth, noise for truth, polish for substance. And that's why so many who peak too soon burn out. They built themselves on speed, not strength, on applause, not clarity, on hype, not foresight. Their victory was a sprint, and sprints don't last. You, on the other hand, the so-called latecomer, kept searching, kept learning. You were piecing together insights while others were exhausting themselves, chasing the wrong ones. Here's the irony society refuses to admit. Speed sparkles for a moment, but insight endures forever. The obsession with youth isn't the celebration of truth. It's a distraction. A spell meant to keep you anxious, chasing, regretting your own pace. Look closer and the cracks appear. The prodigy who collapses at 30. The wunderkind drained by 35. The overnight sensation who fades into silence. Because when speed lacks foundation, collapse is inevitable. When the sprint ends, emptiness remains. That was the lie you inherited. If too many people realize that depth, patience, and deliberate living create unstoppable strength, the machinery of panic and haste would break. So they painted patience as weakness. They branded endurance as failure. They disguised wisdom as irrelevance. And you believed it, until now. Because here's the truth they never told you. You're not late. You're moving differently. You're not behind. You're building on a higher level. Society measures in clocks. But life measures in impact. Clocks don't measure consciousness. And consciousness, shaped by time, scars, and silence, outlasts any rush the world glorifies. So the next time you hear the whisper, "You're overdue," remember, that's not truth speaking. That's conditioning echoing. You're not here to echo, you're here to rewrite, invert the story. If delay meant weakness, why do the fast ones so often collapse? Why do prodigies, wunderkinds, the bright young stars burn out before their victories even stabilize? Because success that arrives before selfhood doesn't belong to you. You perform, you please, you run blind. And when the applause fades, so do you. That's not strength. That's dependence dressed up as achievement. But the late bloomers, they're forged in silence, tempered through years of obscurity, hardened by rejection, sharpened by setbacks, refined by sacrifice. That furnace gives them a kind of power that doesn't even appear until competition has already exhausted itself. By your 30s, 40s, 50s, you've walked enough loops to connect dots others can't even see. Youth notices events. You perceive patterns. You've stumbled, repeated mistakes, endured seasons that looked identical, until you uncovered the hidden variations. And now you enter arenas able to sense the unspoken, to spot traps before they're set. That's not theory, that's lived experience. Pain transmuted into foresight, memory reborn as instinct, wisdom etched into your being by time itself. And that's why you remain steady in a world addicted to speed. Because speed without pattern recognition isn't progress, it's running in circles. Youth cracks at the first denial, breaks at heartbreak, shatters when an ambition collapses. But you've been denied and returned, broken and rebuilt, rejected, yet risen again. You stumbled in public, yet still moved forward. You carried disappointment again and again until it strengthened you instead of breaking you. True resilience isn't loud. It isn't a hashtag or a highlight reel. It's the quiet refusal to collapse. Strength is built in the fall and rise until rising becomes instinct. That scarred resilience, it doesn't show on the surface, but it's your shield. And when pressure comes, and it always does, You endure. You absorb. You redirect. You outlast. Society consistently underestimates the ones forged in silence. In youth, ego drives everything. Every win must be displayed. Every loss feels like humiliation. Every move is fueled by visibility. But maturity rewrites the formula. Proof is no longer required. Compliments are no longer craved. Approval is no longer pursued. You sharpen your craft. You learn that clarity doesn't come from drive alone, but from perception. You see what matters, and just as important, what doesn't. That's why late bloomers act sparingly but with precision. Every decision cuts through noise. Every step is deliberate. Every effort carries weight because it isn't diluted by vanity. Here, intention replaces spectacle, and intention outlasts applause. Kierkegaard called it the leap of faith, the vault into authentic existence. But here's the truth. Those leaps rarely happen in your 20s. Your 20s are for wearing masks, parental expectations, cultural scripts, mentors' projections, society's blueprints. You act out roles. You seek validation. You live as borrowed versions of yourself. Only later, when those masks crack, when the borrowed scripts collapse, when silence forces you inward, that's when authenticity begins. That's when the hidden self speaks. It's terrifying because it demands you let go of who you thought you were. But it's sacred because it's the birth of who you truly are. That's why late bloomers carry a depth the young can't touch. The authentic self doesn't emerge early. It emerges when it's ready. And once it does, it's unshakable. Picture a vessel. Built in haste, it dazzles at launch but shatters in the first storm. Pretty but fragile. Now picture a vessel built slowly, welded, reinforced, tested in rough waters. That ship becomes indestructible. That's the late bloomer. Not fragile metal but tempered steel. Not just shiny, dangerous, not quick, enduring. They mocked your pause. But the pause was preparation. The delay was the weapon. True construction endures long trials. Remember, you're not behind. You're carrying weapons others don't even see. Pattern recognition that saves decades. Resilience that makes rejection powerless. Clarity that slices through the noise. Authenticity born from leaps of faith. A self hardened in fire. That's why, when late bloomers rise, society struggles to oppose them. Because they weren't trained in applause, but in obscurity. And obscurity is the fiercest forge. Society measures strength in noise, followers, headlines, cheers. It assumes the unseen doesn't exist. But what if the reverse is true? What if silence isn't emptiness, but preparation? What if obscurity isn't failure, but gestation? Most forget this. Brilliant lives almost always begin in subtle embers. The longer the ember burns unseen, the brighter the blaze when it finally erupts. In craftsmanship, wood isn't shaped in public glare. It's seasoned in seclusion, tested, and slowly carved until it's ready to outlast centuries. Legacies aren't rushed. They're forged in perseverance, especially in the years when the world calls you irrelevant. Take Julia Child. She wasn't a kitchen prodigy. She wasn't a culinary star in her 20s. She spent decades in bureaucracy, diplomacy, and observation, paths that seemed unrelated, even misaligned. For years, no one saw her. Then, in her 40s, she discovered cuisine. And she didn't emerge as a fleeting fad, but as a master whose depth and nuance redefined an art. Today, Julia Child is eternal. But people forget the silent decades that made her eternal. That's the paradox of delay. It disguises itself as regret, when in truth it's gestation. While others chased applause, you were gathering strength. While others built fragile scaffolds, you laid granite foundations. Obscurity is not weakness, it's hidden transformation. The caterpillar looks still inside the chrysalis, yet inside, everything is being rebuilt, not dead, becoming. So when you feel unseen, remember, it's not punishment, it's intention. Silence is the fire, rejection is the chisel, Delay is the furnace. And then suddenly, you launch, sharpened, powerful, unshakable. That's why late bloomers are dangerous. When they arrive, the competition is already obsolete. Their fire doesn't flicker, it roars. Their foundation doesn't bend, it holds. And when they finally step forward, they don't sprint. They don't need fanfare. Their very presence reshapes the landscape. Because real transformation begins inside. The only battlefield that matters is the mind. And right now, that battlefield is under siege. Voices declaring you're late, dismissed, expired. These aren't truths, they're decrees. And your subconscious has been obeying without question, nodding silently. Yes, understood. That's how most people live. Not by scarcity of opportunity, but by the repetition of conditioning. They don't live 40 years. They live 1 year, repeated 40 times. So visualize your mind as a command center. On one side, an old commander shouting doubt, regret, hesitation. On the other, a new commander, quiet but ready to rise. The reality? Only one can give the orders at any moment, and most people keep saluting the wrong one. Kierkegaard called it subjective truth. The beliefs you rehearse become your lived reality. Most don't admit they practice anything, but they do. Negatively. They rehearse failure. They rehearse doubt. They replay disappointments until they mistake them for identity. But subjective truth isn't fantasy. It's discipline. The same way you rehearse defeat, you can rehearse strength. You can repeat a new identity until the old one withers away. Because becoming is practice. It's simulating who you are becoming until you no longer pretend. You are. There are 3 affirmations every late bloomer must repeat until they're etched into the mind. First, you are not delayed. You are precisely on time. Second, your wounds are wisdom. Your postponements are depth. Third, you are not behind. You are prepared. Say them daily. Say them with intent. At first, your voice may tremble. That's expected. You're speaking in a language your old self has never known. But keep speaking. With repetition, the old commander grows silent. And in that silence, the new self begins to speak, without regret, without excuses, issuing its own commands. Because the real battlefield was never the world outside. It has always been the story you tell yourself. And it's time to dismantle the old story and issue the narrative you choose. Recondition your mind relentlessly. Repeat these affirmations with the morning light. Imagine yourself unbreakable. But understand this, if by night you return to the same stagnant environment, your resolve will erode. And that erosion is subtle. Toxic environments rarely reveal themselves as such. They feel familiar, comfortable. The laughter of old friends, the warmth of family dinners, the endless recycled conversations. Yet hidden in the undertones are the whispers. It's too risky to begin now. Be realistic. You should have settled already. These aren't harmless views. They are pathogens. Words that seep into your core, repeated until they root as convictions you never chose. Picture a drop of water, harmless, soft, fleeting. But let it strike the same rock every hour, every day, every year, and the rock will be reshaped, not by force, but by repetition. That is the power of your environment. Each passing remark of doubt, each lament about missed chances, each caution to play it safe, each one a drop. And drop by drop, they sculpt your identity into something you never intended. You think your thoughts are your own, but too often, they're echoes of the voices you've absorbed. Kierkegaard was unsentimental. You become the average of the 5 people you spend most of your time with, not just financially, cognitively, emotionally, even spiritually. If your circle speaks limitation, you begin to think in limitation. If they frame life through fear, you begin to breathe fear. Your subconscious listens not only to you, but to those you allow near. Every repeated phrase is a seed. Leave the soil unguarded, and an unintended thicket will grow. The harsh irony? The greatest obstacles are often not enemies but those who love you, yet love the outdated version of you. Their care, though well-meaning, anchors you to an identity you've already outgrown. They don't intend sabotage, but they soothe you into stagnation, and comfort when prolonged corrodes destiny. Clarification: this is not a call to abandon everyone, not exile, not hermitage, but gatekeeping. Not by age, but by energy, not by malice, but by protection. The phrase is simple. Love remains, but influence is unaffordable right now. Repression silently absorbs poison. Boundaries are active refusal. No war, no hostility. Simply a refusal to let their story become your story. In practice, this means quietly distancing yourself from those who, without intending harm, anchor you to regret or restraint. It means declining conversations that glorify missed chances. It means stepping away from gatherings that celebrate the old you, not from hate, but from sustenance. Growth never owes explanation. Protection needs no apology. Here's the truth. There is no kindness in allowing toxins into your mind. There is no loyalty in letting conversations shrink you. Conditioning is real, and if you don't choose your environment will choose you. Remember this: the strongest steel, forged in fire, becomes useless if it's submerged nightly in swamp water. You cannot bloom in poisoned soil. You cannot evolve in corrosion. Either refine your environment or remain fractured. And the most subtle danger? The one almost no one sees until it's too late? Nostalgia. We mistake it as harmless. A tender replay of youthful days, childhood adventures, teenage certainty, the feeling of being light, free, unstoppable. It feels warm, but nostalgia carries a hidden blade, because clinging to your former self kills your destined self. Kierkegaard called it the stages of life. To progress, you must shed old identities. If you don't, you remain suspended, living echoes of what you once were, instead of becoming what you're meant to be. We wear veils. We adopt roles to survive certain seasons. Student, employee, the ever-patient friend. These masks once protected us. They gave us belonging. But when clutched too long, they harden into chains. Here's the brutal truth. The person you once were is unfit for the person you now need to become. Nostalgia disguises sabotage as comfort. It whispers, "Go back." Remember when things were simple? When you were admired? When you were untouched by scars? Yet what it offers is a trade with ghosts, a replay of a past that never truly existed as we remember it. The past sings, but in its melody lies betrayal. Think of it as a haunting. As you step forward into the unknown, your shadow self tugs at your arm, persuading you that yesterday was safer, purer, better. And if you stare backward too long, you freeze. You decay while standing still. That is why transformation feels like grief, because it is grief. Growth isn't just new pursuits, it is the burial of old identities. And grief is heavy. Kierkegaard's insight is devastating yet liberating. Every stage of life demands the death of the one before it. The very veil that once sheltered you must now be laid to rest, or it will suffocate you. Honesty requires a farewell. To the former self you say, "Thank you for carrying me this far, but I can't afford you anymore." That isn't betrayal. That is loyalty to the future, to the self waiting ahead. The trap of nostalgia is the belief that your peak is already behind you. And if you believe it, you quietly diminish yourself. You stop taking risks. You stop daring. You clutch fading achievements or broken personas like relics of a dead religion. But ask yourself, what if your most powerful self hasn't even been born yet? Nostalgia isn't memory. It's theft. It drains the energy you need for the life still to be lived. And releasing it always feels like loss. It is the agony of slaying a ghost. For the past never stops calling. But ahead, a new self waits. breathless, unborn, waiting for you to finally let go. This is the phase no one warns you about. It comes without applause, without recognition, without maps. It feels like wandering in a dark forest, unsure if you are lost, or about to discover something no one else has seen. In this void, all your past victories feel irrelevant. Old scripts no longer fit. And you ask, who am I now? The silence that answers feels unbearable. But silence is not death. Silence is gestation. It is the seed hidden beneath the soil, breaking itself apart so it can emerge. Outwardly, nothing moves. Inwardly, everything shifts. The danger is comparison, watching others surge ahead, stacking trophies while you appear still. But Kierkegaard reminds us, speed is not depth. The shallow stream makes the loudest noise. Transformation happens in silence. History confirms this. Before resurrection, there is the tomb. Before eruption, there is disappearance. Buddha vanished into the forest. Kant spent years in silence before his masterpieces. Empires collapsed into obscurity before rising transformed. The void is not a pause, it is the price. The task is endurance, trusting what is unseen, accepting that true selfhood is forged in the shadows, not in the spotlight, not punished, remade. Emergence from this void is not improvement, it is transmutation. You return as someone who never existed before, self-forged, self-owned, inimitable. This silence is vital. It is the soil where authenticity grows. Yet society demands speed. It glorifies what is quick, visible, and loud. Success is measured in views, likes, and temporary applause. If you are not early, they say you are irrelevant. But beneath the obsession with acceleration lies a hunger for something else. Depth, meaning, truth that lasts beyond the scroll. And this is where the late bloomers, the delayed flourishers, matter. They are not merely survivors of time's race. They are civilization's recalibrators. They emerge after the noise collapses, carrying truths that cannot be rushed. History shows it clearly. Cultures collapse not from a lack of innovation, but from a lack of wisdom. Athens had brilliance, but drowned in pride. The Enlightenment raced forward, yet lost its soul. Every age required those who matured slowly, who endured long silences, who spoke only after being remade by struggle. They became the voices of balance, the builders of meaning. The world doesn't need more fireworks that dazzle briefly and vanish. It needs steady flames, fires that endure storms, winters, and centuries. These are the fires carried by the late bloomers, who protect their spark through years of obscurity until the world is finally ready. Because what civilization truly lacks is not noise, not speed, but perseverance. Perseverance cannot go viral. It cannot be compressed into a clip. Yet it alone shapes what lasts. The late bloomer is proof. Truth has its own timeline, not aligned with fame's. They are not slow, they are deep. They are the remedy to a world burning itself out on haste. The insight is this: rebirth never begins with applause, it begins in silence, by burning the old self, by choosing obscurity for the sake of growth. Obscurity is not death, it is gestation. The seed is not gone when hidden in soil. The chrysalis is not failure when the caterpillar disappears. So if the world races past you, do not panic. You are not behind. You are evolving. The real danger is not being unseen. The danger is refusing to disappear when disappearance is required. Late bloomers vanish. They go silent. They endure ridicule, dismissal, being forgotten. And then, suddenly, they return. Unrecognizable. They do not rejoin the race. They arrive after the race has burned itself out. When others are depleted, chasing relevance, the late bloomer steps forward with endurance, with depth, with wisdom that does not fade. So if you are unseen now, excellent. If you are dismissed as slow, lost, irrelevant, excellent. That is not decline. That is evolution. The world does not need more noise. It needs your fire. Slower, yes, but lasting. And when it comes, it will not be forgotten.